This is K-12 Tech Talk. K-12 Tech Talk. The podcast by K-12 Techs for K-12 Techs. Real conversations, real arguments, and real banter on trending K-12 technology topics and issues.
Live from the somethingcool.com studios, this is the K-12 Tech Talk podcast, episode 98. In this episode, it's another interview, and we are interviewing Tom and Lenny. These guys have a pedigree about them. They are fantastic. Lenny was the CIO of Katy School District in Texas for a while. He then went on to be the CIO of Houston School District, 233,000 kids. Can you imagine that? Former board member of CoSN as well. And Tom, he is on the Council of Great City Schools. He is a current board member of CoSN, and he is leaving them. They're kicking him off, as he says, this year because he has term limited it out. And he is the former CIO of Albuquerque Schools. Mark, where have we also heard about Albuquerque?
So if this is the first time you're listening to us, we recommend actually starting one episode ago with the interview with the Superintendent of Albuquerque Public Schools, Scott Elder. And he will set the stage for tonight's episode. So if you have not listened to that last episode, we recommend pausing right now, going back and checking that one out, and then come back and listen to this interview because it's a really good duo. And we'll talk about the third episode coming up later.
And share. We didn't mention this last week, but share us with your friends. We've got a crazy amount of traction on episode 97 with that interview with Scott from Albuquerque. Share us with your friends, your meeting groups. That's the way this podcast grows, and I think the feedback we have gotten, especially on the last episode, has been outstanding. We hope you learned something from it, and if you do, please share it with individuals that you think might learn something from it. Chris, do you want to talk about what we talk about, or what they're going to hear going into this episode tonight?
I just would say, as you're listening to these guys, check yourself and check your department. There's some things that get said about if you don't want to get a pen test because you want to, or you don't want to share the results, that kind of stuff. Some of that stigma that comes from like a third party checking out your network. It's good to hear all the reasons of why you should do things to get the conversation started. Going off of last episode to this, if tech people want this to not be a tech problem, we have to start doing things to make it be seen as a bigger picture. And that was my pride check today. I think I need to humble myself and do that scan and let the results be seen by others.
I think the phrase or the quote that I took away the most from this episode was Lenny's quote, "Please tell me my baby's ugly," or something along those lines. I want you to tell me my baby's ugly, when talking about, IT directors and CIOs think of their networks as their baby. His stance is, tell me where I can get better. Tell me how ugly my baby is.
The uglier the baby, the better.
Right. Exactly.
That is a title of tonight's show, Ugly Babies.
No, I think the title, how about we go with, Please Tell Me My Baby is Ugly. We'll figure that out. So yeah, here's the interview. Go back and listen to 97 if you haven't. Shoot us an email. Find us on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. Give us a share. We appreciate you listening.
We are here tonight with Tom Ryan and Lenny Schad to continue our conversation from last week with the the Superintendent of Albuquerque Public Schools. And actually, Tom Ryan, I'll start with Tom, is very instrumental in bringing all these folks together for this three-part series. So why don't I give you guys the floor for a couple minutes? Tell us about your background and what brought you to here tonight.
Okay,
Lenny,
perfect.
go ahead.
Well, yep, I'll get us started. Thanks for asking us here. Cybersecurity is such an important topic, so I'm really impressed that you're kind of putting this to the forefront. So, my name's Lenny Schad. I was the Chief Information Officer for the Katy Independent School District down in Houston. It's a suburb in Houston. There were about 60,000 kids when I was there. I moved from Katy down to Houston ISD. I was the CIO in Houston. And for a portion of my tenure there, I was also the COO of Houston. And so very familiar with transformational initiatives, one-to-one. We were doing all of that kind of work when I was there. I left Houston in 2019. And I'm working for district administration. I work with superintendents and IT leaders across the country. I'm a former board member of CoSN, former board member of IMS Global, and I'm just really pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Cool.
Thank you.
With that introduction, I don't know if I should even say anything because he's a pretty amazing guy. I have been working with the Council of Great City Schools for like 25 years. The last 15 or so, I've led the senior investigator for IT reviews, where we go in and look at the operational IT infrastructure, leadership alignment with instruction, and kind of give a current state assessment for CIOs. And I also have helped run the CIO conferences that they do. These are large urban school districts across the country. Also, as Mark mentioned, a board member with CoSN, and I've been with them for 15 years. They're kicking me to the curb at this next conference in Austin. I've reached my term limit, so I'm being let go, and it's been a great opportunity to meet a lot of people across the country. In fact, have had some great conversations with people like Mark and other CIOs. Like Mark said, we've got a listserv that we put together and a Friday call. Just it's kind of interesting. Mark will give a call out and say, "Oh my gosh, this application is down," and the people on the West Coast haven't even got up yet. And it's, "Oh, thank Mark for letting me know I could be prepared by the time I got to my classroom." So it's been when COVID first started, it came in from the Northwest, and so we were getting all of the information. What are they doing? How's it impacting? And so we were really prepared as it started to move across the country. So it's been a great resource for us. I was also the CIO for 11 years with the Albuquerque Public Schools, retired from that system, and then worked the last 5 years at the Santa Fe Public Schools through the COVID crisis with our schools. Because I've had an opportunity to meet with a lot of people, Lenny and I have gotten together and started this K-12 Strategic Technology Advisory Group. And we work with school districts across the country, leadership development, doing presentations about cybersecurity awareness, IT reviews, and some leadership mentoring and roadmap development. So we've had a great opportunity to take the experiences that we've had in the K-12 environment and move it into an opportunity to help folks develop their IT strategies in the districts.
Mark, did you send Seesaw? Like when that thing went down, did you send that in that group?
That was in the group. Yep. No, I'm usually on the East Coast, so I wake up and find the problems first and then send it to the group. Mm-hmm. And then the West Coast districts, by the time they wake up and get to school, everything's been solved. So,
I thought you were going to say the West Coast fixes the problems that you find.
Well, no, by the time they wake up, these outages, when we have these major outages. So it's helpful, and Tom has really been instrumental in bringing us together. And I've known Tom for 10 years, and I can honestly say that, there are a lot of folks out there that give advice and say, here's what you should be doing. Well, Tom has been leading on both sides, both leading at the district level, but also saying at this national level, here's what we need to do. So I'm super appreciative of Tom and my whole team is actually. He's been able to come into our district and help us out in person.
Awesome. So where is Mark Racine and who are you? Because usually it's just a bunch of grief I get from you, so I'm not sure what to do with the compliment.
Yeah, I'm trying to behave tonight. Doing
yeah, we have a code here.
Yeah,
we're professional. Yeah. We don't drink bourbon or anything during the show. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to last week's episode with Scott from Albuquerque, but we had a blast with Scott. We felt like it was a really good interview. The feedback that we've received online has been fantastic. What kind of lessons learned, or what kind of takeaways do you guys have from that interview, or incidents like the LA Unified incident that happened a couple months ago? What do you see as big takeaways for schools?
Lenny, why don't you talk about LAUSD for a sec?
One of the things, and we see this a lot in the IT reviews that we do, is the districts are really struggling with rogue IT. And when we look at some of the things coming out of LA, it's something that I think just IT departments have to pay attention to. Now, rogue IT, it isn't that these people have bad intentions, right? It's that people are trying to get their jobs done. Video cameras, people are trying to get video cameras up for safety and security. And so it's not that anybody's intentionally trying to do something wrong, but they aren't the experts. And when we think about avenues that cybersecurity is really under attack, it's these areas of rogue IT where they're not putting best practices in place, right? Tom and I have talked a lot about this, that, up until about a year ago, when it came to cybersecurity, it was always convenience first, and then we'll worry about security. And I think rogue IT is a great example of convenience first, right? Well, IT, they might be the Department of No, or they might be a roadblock. So we're just going to go create our own little version of IT to get our job done. Yeah. And I think it's a matter of really stopping and saying, we've got to now switch our mentality to say it has to be security first, and convenience will be something we'll think about later.
Yeah, I know several IT directors that have been called roadblocks, and Dr. No, to steal a phrase from James Bond. So yeah, that, it's unfortunate we do get that moniker at times, but what people don't realize is there's a reason behind that. And I guess we have to do a better job of explaining that reason. So how, so first off script question, how do you do a better job of explaining that rationale of being Dr. No or being that roadblock? How do you help faculty or building administrators understand the why behind the no?
Well, I think we have to change the narrative around cybersecurity. And what I mean by that is, I think people have become numb to cybersecurity is a big problem. The number of districts being hit. I think they've become numb to it. So I think we have to change the narrative around cybersecurity to really talk about consequences, right? And I think we have to help people understand what this landscape is. If everybody understood what the risk landscape looked like, why are we still having phishing explosions going all around in school systems, right? Yeah. I don't think people really understand this landscape. So I think we change the narrative. I think we go back and we have to really explain what is the cybersecurity landscape, and then talk in real terms about consequences. So if I'm talking to a superintendent, I have to make it real for them. Their public opinion, right? Their bond ratings. If I'm talking to CFOs, the same thing. If I'm talking to teachers, I have to make the consequences real for those people and stop talking in these, K-12 is under attack and, 1 in 3 districts are being attacked. I think we've become numb to it. So we have to change the narrative.
Josh, I'd also like to add that we used to recommend that the CIO needs to be a cabinet level position, needs to report to the superintendent.
Sure.
I've changed that because sometimes IT is so buried in the organization that it's really just a break-fix shop. And so they hired somebody to do a break-fix job. They're not a strategy person. They're not really good, perhaps dealing with a lot of other people. They're kind of Superman. Tell me what your problem is. I'll get there, or I'm going to clean up on aisle 3. And so we don't need that personality in the strategic conversations with your CFO or your chief finance person, your chief academic person. It needs a different type of temperament. Maybe that's the CTO, and there's a CIO or another person that has a strategic connection with the organization so that they can explain in a non-technical way why this is important. Why, on our Friday calls, one of the school districts was having a problem with their video cameras. The school police went out and bought some cameras, put them in, didn't let IT know. And it caused a major problem. And the CIO then went and did a search on what the password is to get in when you set up the system, and found out the security people didn't change that. So he was able to get access.
Oh, sure.
Well, the school police was doing something good, but they're not thinking of it from an IT person. And when we brought that up on Friday, several of the IT leaders did it, and they found that a lot of the school districts have that exact same problems. And it could be the security systems, it could be point of sale, it could be the heating and cooling systems. They just don't have an IT perspective, and therefore it becomes a big threat for everyone in the district.
So, humor me here. How does this scale down? You know, when you guys are talking, I'm thinking big shop, a CTO, a CIO, and you have that chief technical guy who is a technical guy, and then you have the other guy that can explain it to the masses in a humanly manner, and not necessarily a broke fix guy. But like my shop, I'm relatively small compared to you guys. I'm minuscule compared to the places you have been. I've got 3,300 students, and I have 3 IT employees, including myself. And I think a lot of the listeners that we have, especially here in Missouri, they are small shops. So how do you scale that conversation down so that it fits in a small shop? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when I was with Albuquerque, I think it was 90,000 students when I was there, and then I went to Santa Fe, and I think there are around 10,000 students. And we've done IT reviews for 1 or 2 IT leaders in a school, a charter school. Yeah. So there's strengths and challenges on both sides, right? You've got these big urban centers that can't fill the positions they have, and so they're sitting vacant, or they don't have any cybersecurity effort because it hasn't been funded. So it's other duties that as described in. There's a lot of communication gap between what I can say and how do I reach all the principals and directors, et cetera. On the other hand, when I was in Santa Fe, I could call every principal in the morning and have a conversation. So my line of communication, my ability to partner with them and strategically help them move forward was easier, but I didn't have the technical staff. I couldn't hire. They weren't even in the community. They might not have been within 300 miles of some of my remote communities. And so that becomes all the more important to have a network of people, so you're not inventing the solution yourself, having some partnerships with some vendors that are aware of your infrastructure, or maybe it's a retainer kind of a thing, so that they can come in or they manage that aspect of your program. And a lot of states have, some of them call them BOCES or regional cooperatives, or places where you can be a part of a network of people, so that you don't have to have the skills of all of those different expertise areas underneath your hat. You've got other people that can give you a hand and grow this out. Lenny, would you add something to that?
Yeah, I want to feed off of that a little bit, because when I was in Houston, so we were 230,000 students when I was there. One of the things that I did was I established these strategic partnerships, right? So every year I was getting a risk assessment, and these people became the hired guns for me, right? They knew my infrastructure, and they were on the ready when and if I had an incident. And Tom and I were talking about this. When you have an incident, your team is frazzled, right? They're flustered, they're frazzled, they're not going to be thinking straight. So your ability to bring in some outside expertise, I think, is really critical. I think that same thing holds true for smaller school systems, right? So I think these external partnerships, it doesn't matter what size you are. I think from a cybersecurity perspective, they're really critical. Because they become that center of calmness, those experts that can come in when it's hit the fan, and they can really help your teams get through it. And I think it's, like I said, I don't think it matters what size you are. I think the day and age we're in right now, you have to start establishing those external partnerships.
Let's talk about Extreme Networks really quick. I'm going to post an article, a video about Jefferson College's success with Extreme Networks. And you can reach out to, and I'll post his email address, Dominic Mayer. If you're into networking, looking at new switches, all that kind of stuff, check out Extreme Networks.
And Scott said something that I think is key in your last interview. This isn't a tech problem. As long as it remains a tech problem, then schools are going to fail. They're not going to be prepared because we don't have authority over the instructional side or the operational side or the financial side. And the threat can come in from several vectors. So I think from Scott's perspective, and I think if you had the question, now if you knew then what you know now, what would you do different? I think Scott said and mentioned a cross-functional team where the finance officer understands the threat to finances, the threat to the budget, the threat to paying bills. The instructional person understands the threat. So you're looking comprehensively at that problem, as opposed to it's the 2 or 3 people that you have in your organization that are dedicated to IT. It really needs to be something bigger than that. I was speaking at the COO conference, the Chief Operational Officers Conference for the Council of Great City Schools just a couple of weeks ago. And I had asked these people, and some of them manage the IT reports underneath them. And I said, do you guys have fire drills? And they all said yes. And do you practice those in the schools, in the classrooms? Yes. And do you have people that are taking metrics, maybe timing how long it takes? Do you have drills for tornadoes or some person on campus? And the school leadership, the site leadership owns that, and they're involved and active. And then I asked, how many of you had a fire in a school in the last couple of years? And one school district representing, and there was thousands of schools represented in this meeting. One district had one school that had a fire over the weekend or something like that. And it's important to have those drills, but we get attacked on cybersecurity every single day. And then they go to the 1 or 2 or 3 IT people and say, why is this broken? Why don't you fix it? And it's impossible, just like it would be impossible for one person in charge of making sure everybody was ready for a fire at their building to do all that all on their own. So if we don't take an enterprise approach, and if we don't help the executives in the school district understand that this is their problem, and unless we take individual responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen, it's just never going to be done, regardless of whether you're a large urban school district or a very small school system.
Yeah. No, and Josh, too, I mean, thinking through what Tom and Lenny are talking about, one of the things that the small districts have such a huge advantage of is that you can put everybody in your district into one room, which is, it just cannot happen in the larger districts. We have to rely on chains of communication and multi-layers of communication. And communication is absolutely critical and necessary. But in the small districts, it's easier. It is easier to walk down the hallway, make relationships with folks. And if you need to, put every staff member into one room, which just can't happen.
And to give you an idea, I can literally walk to every building on my campus. Like, my entire campus is within walking distance. So that gives you an idea. Yes, I can go walk and visit that principal and the other principal and the other principal, all within about 20 minutes. Yeah,
and the challenge is, as bad as it was for LA with all of the technical staff that they have, and they still get penetrated, here you are, one person taking on a whole nationally sponsored cyber attack.
Right.
It's an insurmountable problem if it's going to be only the school system that's going to address it. It has to be the state. It has to be the community. It has to be federal resources that is much more available. LA gets hit, and they've got Homeland Security and the FBI and the Department of Education, and all of these major businesses, cybersecurity leads are swarmed in to address that problem. Well, what do you do when you're on a campus that you can walk to every school in 15 minutes? Like, you're not going to get that kind of a response, yet you still have the same level of threat.
And responsibility. The funny thing about that LA story, I remember reading it in an article, and I'm sure it was probably tongue in cheek, but they said, they picked up the phone and called the White House. And it's like, man, to have the kind of power to be able to pick up the phone and call the White House and say, I need help. That would be an interesting position to be in. Would it not?
That's a blessing and a curse, though.
Oh, sure.
Right? I mean, that's to be careful what you ask for, kind of a thing.
I think actually, Suhail, the current CIO of LA, one of his famous quotes is, when they win or when they award a bid to a vendor, it's congrats, you've won LAUSD as a customer. But the bad news is you've won LAUSD as a customer.
Yeah.
Let me cut in really quick and talk about Provision Data Solutions. They can help you with your wireless, your networking, your VLAN, DHCP, DNS, all that kind of stuff and beyond. They can help you get your servers going. Provision Data Solutions. You can email ryanr@provisionds.com.
So what should back to the interview with Scott from Albuquerque? What should other districts be paying attention to? So that response by their IT department and quite frankly, Scott's response, because that's been some of the feedback that I've gotten from tech directors and CIOs was like, holy cow, this superintendent gets it. Like he's one of us. He's got IT's back. What should other districts be paying attention to, both from the way that their IT department responded and the way that their superintendent responded?
So Scott didn't know the threat profile of his district. He didn't know how much risk. I mean, that he had their back because he didn't know. I mean,
Sure.
and you know, one of the things I really appreciate about Scott is he got out of the way. He let the IT team, and then his job was to make sure people stayed off their back so they get this problem solved. He spent time doing the work that he was a better expert in. And so he doesn't have this ego that needs to get out in front of the community and say, I'm in control, we're going to be back up in an hour, or this vendor or this system or this equipment went down and we got it fixed. And they are falsely putting an image that they're leading the problem, which just leads to a whole bunch more. And that wasn't Scott. He had a quote that said in the paper, it should be very clear to everyone that somebody intentionally, aggressively, and very publicly tried to harm our school community. We have to assume that entity is still watching our every move. And the media, and they just backed off, and they let the professionals take care of the problem. And I think that's one of the reasons why they were able to respond so quickly and get back up. So it wasn't that he's a good IT supporter in the sense of he gets it. He got that he didn't know it, and he was a good leader, and he led the organization the right way so the IT team could take the time to get this thing done. And you know that they're working 24/7 trying to solve that to get this fixed. They're just
absolutely.
So that's where I saw him being real impressive.
So Lenny and Tom, you travel around the country and talk to CIOs, but you also talk to superintendents. What are some of the things that you tell superintendents about and things that they need to pay attention to? Or, you know, if somebody's not Scott, what are you going to say to them?
And I'll start out, and Lenny does a lot of work through district administrator because he leads that in FETC. So he's got a really strong venue, but this is a leadership issue. And I think the first thing is you can't check off a lot of boxes and say we've got a cybersecurity plan or that we're safe. It's going to be a hopeless endeavor unless you've got leadership saying we take ownership of it. And so having the ability for the cabinet to say we own this and we're going to do it, and then the IT to lay out or help lay out a plan that's going to then put in the steps that are necessary to prevent and also respond once a event happens. I think if you don't catch the leadership part of this, the rest of it is it isn't going to be able to be effective for you in fighting cybersecurity. Lenny has an opportunity to speak and lead conversations around cybersecurity. So Lenny, this would be a great question for you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the comment I made about the narrative. When I'm talking to superintendents and I have a very specific cybersecurity presentation that I give to them, one of the things that I make them think about is when an event happens, who's going to be at the microphone? And, every one of them sit back and they're like, well, it's going to be me. And then I ask them some questions. If you're going to be at the microphone, questions are going to be, what has your district done to be prepared? What is your district doing to remedy? And they can't answer the questions, right? So again, when I'm talking about changing the narrative, we have to make it real for them. And the minute I put it into that context, I have their attention, right? And then we start talking about what are the critical things that need to happen, right? That, your IT department could get $5 million today, and that doesn't put you in any better position than you are right now, because it's that one user hitting that one click and you're done. So what are you doing from an awareness perspective? The other thing that I think I've really seen pick up momentum this year is talking about the consequences and enforcement of awareness programs. I think people are really good at putting awareness programs in, but they're not monitoring and managing it to see, are we getting better, right? Project Tomorrow has a really interesting survey. They've done it 2 years in a row now, specifically on cybersecurity, and they focus on what's the awareness level for IT people and what's the awareness level for district administrators and board members. And it's shocking to see the difference, right? IT has it rated really high. Board members and administrators still 30-40% of saying, yeah, this is an important issue. So we still have to change that narrative around why it's a district level problem, and making it real for those superintendents, putting them in the reality of, you're going to be the one answering the questions. Can you answer the questions? If you can't, what are you going to do?
I can remember for myself years ago, we had legit phishing deal. This link was going around, tons of staff clicking on it, terrible thing. And we figured out it was 10, 12 employees that had clicked on that link. So then we start doing phishing test campaigns. Those tests, we had the same people clicking the link. And then I brought that to leadership, and it didn't do anything. There was no hey, we had that bad thing happen. Now we do these tests. We're having the same issues. The same people are going to click the link. And like you're saying, it was still a tech problem.
Right. There was no consequence to it. Right.
Chris, you probably have the same 5 or 6 people that don't get their data stuff in, their budgets in on time. They've gotten their rosters or schedule built for this. I don't know what it is, but there's these 20% of your team is causing 80% of the problem.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it's clicking on the link or are you going to get your budget in on time. They seem to be the same folks.
And to Chris's point, so I'm kind of struggling with that right now too. We've done phishing tests for probably 3-4 years now. Well, but since before COVID. And this year, for whatever reason, my phishing rate is awful. And it's ticked down just a hair since the start of the school year, but now we're ticking back up again. And I historically made an agreement with the superintendent at the time that we're going to do these phishing exercises, and it is not going to be a punishment or got you type thing. I'm going to celebrate the people that identify it. And, at one time I went around and gave out bags of Swedish fish to people as a reward for reporting it to the help desk as a joke.
Wait a minute, Swedish fish, are those little crackers that are orange?
Yeah.
They're little gummy fish that are kind of red. Yeah.
No one likes those, Josh.
That was supposed to be that was an incentive. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying, oh, come on, Tom.
Go ahead.
Like if you click the link, you didn't get the Swedish fish.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why they're clicking, Josh.
It should be.
I don't want the Swedish fish.
You should give out licorice.
Josh, I think that went differently in your head, right? I think it went differently in your head.
How about licorice, right? If you didn't click the link, you get the red licorice. If you did, you get the black licorice.
I'm kind of at this point.
Oh, no, he's one of those guys. Never mind. He likes the black licorice.
No, I don't like black licorice. Yeah, I don't like licorice. But anyway.
Do you personally like Swedish fish?
Oh, yeah. Love them.
Okay. Josh, just to bring this back, I do think it's really important. I know Mark has done this in his district. You start out with a proactive response. You're talking about the number of people and how it's getting better and better.
Right.
You're rewarding the first people that can find that phishing attack. You can always go back to that 20% of folks that are always going to screw it up. But then if you can turn this into a positive thing, then it's going to be adopted a lot better than a punitive thing. That doesn't have a punitive. There is a reactive, people that are doing it wrong. And then you do have to have consequences, but I think you got to be able to monitor, and you also have to be able to tie this into a comprehensive training program. Going back to that fire drill, they did something every month to practice how to do this. So how do we tie the training and awareness program together so that, and then the people that are going to evaluate the people they're involved and understand why this is a critical threat to their work.
Yeah.
So I think it's more comprehensive than the phishing program. It's an ongoing training and development. I think there's classes that incorporating it with the curriculum with the students. And by doing that, you also get the teachers engaged in they know the why of the problem. And so it's a more comprehensive approach to this training and development that has to happen. And again, 2 or 3 people in a district can't do it. It's got to be owned by principals and by teachers in the organization to be effective.
Yeah, the awareness campaigns, a lot of times when Tom and I go into school systems and we ask them about their awareness campaign, they say, we have, just like airborne pathogen, we have the cybersecurity session at the beginning of the year. That's not an awareness program, right? That's one and done, doesn't get it. So, I think going off of what Tom said, this has to be something that's monthly. One of the things when I was in Houston, every time the superintendent brought principals together, which was once a month, we had a cyber session, something on cybersecurity. We had monthly awareness programs that were going out to principals. We were putting it into our learning management system so teachers could incorporate it in. So, it has to be something that's in front of them all the time so that there's that awareness that continues to grow. And then you have to monitor and manage. Are we getting better? If we're not getting better, why? What do we need to do to change?
And I feel lucky right now, school safety has kind of reinvigorated in our area. Unfortunately, we had a school shooting in our area not long ago, less than a month or so ago. And school safety is back at the top of the list, kind of reinvigorated that conversation. And I will say that cyber is in that discussion already. Like my district leadership completely understand that, school shootings are horrible. We need to train for that. But so are cyber events. They are horrible. Yeah. They can impact schools for periods of time, and we need to train for those as well. So we've started that discussion of tabletop exercises, just like we do for active shooter drills and fire drills, like you mentioned. It seems like we're getting headway to start doing some of those cyber tabletops as well. So I feel lucky in that regard.
Well,
congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the ransomware, that's one aspect of this cyber threat that we're facing. But once they steal that student data, we've got students whose identities have been stolen, and all of a sudden you got a 3rd grade student that has a car loan because somebody stole their identity. We've got federal and state rules that say we have to protect that. So you open yourself up to lawsuits, because even if you pay the ransom, that doesn't mean they don't sell your data to other folks. So this data privacy issue is very critical. I mean, who wants to have anybody that's had their identity stolen knows the nightmare that is. And
right.
Which is kind of strange. Here we are, I've got my bank does multi-factor and my insurance program, anything that has to do with money or investments, all of those things have lots of security, and I'm glad they do. They let me know any time there's anything that might be going or logging onto a new computer. And our businesses did that not because it's cheap, because it's important. Yet here we are, leaders of school districts that are some of the biggest organizations within the community. Your school district is probably every bit as big as your city. You probably have more people and staff than your city. Yet we as leaders of the district aren't putting the same level of protection on the data and information of the students and staff that we have. It's mind-boggling to me that we would allow that much risk to our community, which we're charged to protect, and just assume it's not going to happen to us. It's just not a great plan for success.
Yeah, that's that convenience. Convenience was first, right? That's the whole problem.
Yeah, and when you have, organizations or groups that are willing to kind of dig their heels in and fight against some of that organizational change, like multi-factor authentication or phishing exercises. It's unfortunate that some of that stuff does turn into a fight. But I think more and more school districts are winning that. You know, here in Missouri, Missouri's I found this summer Missouri is sort of weird. I was at the MS ISAC conference in Baltimore, and there was a K-12 strand, and I attended most of those K-12 sessions, and one of them was about cyber insurance, and everybody in the room except me was saying how they were all going out and soliciting cyber insurance bids on their own as an individual school district. And I was kind of surprised by that, because in Missouri, it's kind of done as a consortium. There's the majority of the school districts in the state are members of this group, and they organize that insurance and they underwrite the insurance. But that was a long roundabout way to say that insurance company is changing some of the rules now to be covered under cyber insurance in Missouri. You have to do 7 things, and one of those things is MFA. And I think that's driving. That's going to make that conversation easier for school districts to say, look, we don't have a choice. If we want to continue to have insurance, we have to do this now. So thankfully, that's being taken out of the hands of the districts a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, talking about this becoming a enterprise awareness thing means that we need to have the cybersecurity effort. Lenny and I promote creating these cross-functional cybersecurity governance teams or teams, and the CIO doesn't need to be the lead of it. I mean, the threat to the finance, which your insurance is probably under, is a huge deal. The CFO can lead the cybersecurity. It could be the CAO, but don't say it's your job and then take all the responsibility. Create this cross-departmental team. Have each of them understand the risk from their part of this to as a threat to the organization. And I think Scott was talking about, besides this is everybody's responsibility, when the CFO, CAO, and CIO come to him and say, we need funding for this, it's a no-brainer. They find the funding for it. It's when the departments, to your point, Josh, are arguing against each other. Well, I need for this and I need it for something else, and there's no movement. That's when the superintendent is lost. How do I make a decision between these competing executives within the organization? So that cross-functional team is a way to kind of build that ownership, that they have some standards that they have adopted, and they're measuring and enforcing those standards across the organization.
So there are a lot of folks that are listening to this saying, sounds great, but I'm competing against health and safety, I'm competing against physical safety, I'm competing against crumbling buildings. How do we as technology leaders stand out above the rest, especially when we have not gone through, many districts have not gone through an incident to show the importance of cyber safety?
Lenny, I'm going to give you a shot because I've been going on and on. I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around the Swedish fish.
So, well, I mean, I think you have to start with the basics, right? And it's hard for you to get attention when you don't know what you don't know. And so for any district out there, what we tell them to do is you have to get a risk assessment done, a comprehensive risk assessment, so you understand where the gaps and the risks are. It's at that point that you have the opportunity to start a conversation, right? So if I don't have anything other than cybersecurity is really important and I need a bag of money, I'm not going to get the attention. But if I can get the risk assessment done, that I can sit down with the CFO and the superintendent and have this independent third party come in and tell me and tell us what your risks are, now I start to get attention, right? Because it's not me saying it anymore. It's this independent third party who's coming in. And when they use words like catastrophic risk, right, that gets the attention. Now, I find it really interesting that a lot of technology leaders out there are threatened by these risk assessments because they don't want anybody to call their baby ugly. And we got to change the mentality. If I'm a CIO, I want my baby is called as ugly as it can possibly be, because that's my security blanket. That is my security blanket. So, Mark, it has to start with that risk assessment, because that's what I can sit down with the CFO and superintendent and say, this is where we're sitting. The other thing it does is it takes the opportunity for anybody to come back should an event happen and say, well, if we would have known, we surely would have fixed, which is what we hear all the time, right? So if I'm that CIO, I'm going to sit down with my CFO superintendent with the risk assessment, independent third party, telling them what the risks are. And then at that point, it's a district decision on whether they remediate or not. Either way, I'm not being run up the flagpole when something happens.
So let me ask you real quick, Lenny, on that. As a risk assessment, Mark and I were talking about this before we started tonight. Would you consider like an internal pen test to be a good way to get that information, or no?
No, I think a pen test is an element of a risk assessment. Okay. But I don't think a pen test is that. When I'm talking about a risk assessment, I'm talking about they come in and they look at processes, they look at policy, they look at awareness, they look at your systems, right? They look at it from soup to nuts. That's what has to happen because, the pen test, again, that is viewed as an IT problem. Right? That is isolated to IT. What I want is I want to be able to bring in this independent third party and say, cybersecurity at the enterprise level, here is where you're being successful, and here is where you have some catastrophic risks.
From a culture standpoint, more or less.
Yes.
Well, from a culture standpoint, but it's having a comprehensive plan. When you do a risk assessment, it says you're vulnerable in these, or not a risk. When you do a pen test, it says here's where we got in, here's where your gaps are. But there's different types of pen tests. We get some vendors that are selling something and say, let me do a kind of a pen test light or a risk assessment light, and it isn't comprehensive. So you fill up this hole and you fill up this hole, but you got all these other holes that are just leaking, like the video camera conversation where people are coming in through lax passwords on a video camera or a point of sales or the heating and cooling. So you need to have a comprehensive assessment and plan, and then build a plan, not just fix the things that are broken, because that doesn't help for the future. It just helps you for today, right? So you're really fixing the stuff that was already known. You're not proactively stopping the things that are coming down the pike. So it's important for you to not only have this. CIOs, we're seeing that most districts haven't adopted a cybersecurity framework. They haven't adopted, therefore they haven't implemented. We do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. That means you don't have a comprehensive strategy. You also then don't have a dedicated team. And how would you tell the superintendent that you don't have a dedicated team if you haven't looked to see how ugly your baby was? So the ability to have these comprehensive third-party assessments are to say, we need resources to fix this problem. Now, I don't know if you could ever fix Lenny's ugly baby, but there might be some ways. There might be some ways that you could put together a comprehensive strategy. Most of the districts don't even have a cybersecurity plan. They don't have a framework adopted, they don't have a plan, and they don't have anybody dedicated. And that's all on the IT side. I mean, of the other things about policy. So if we don't get our shop straightened away, how can we expect the rest of the organization?
So the pen test is the result, right? So the pen test is saying, I was able to get into this system and this system and this system, and you left the default password on here, and here's all the data I stole. What we're talking about here is, what are the structures and systems that allow that to take place? Yes. What are the procurement mechanisms that you have in your district to make sure that when someone's buying a new system, a new camera system or something, it's following secure protocols. It's following IT security protocols.
And that's where the smaller districts have an advantage, because I have a pretty good pulse on who's buying a system. Whereas I'm sure, at Houston, when you were there, and Mark, where you are now, I can't imagine trying to wrap my arms around who's buying what, when, and what systems are being looked at. I could see that being impossible.
We're in the process of rolling out DMARC. It's a fascinating example of, if you were to roll out DMARC in your district, or if you haven't already, what are the systems out there that are going to spoof your email domain, right? You have to know what's in your district that's sending out emails with your domain name. For you guys, you could probably do that in 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Large districts are spending weeks and weeks and months trying to figure out who bought what.
Yeah.
It's what?
Yeah, that's a great example of the difference, though. I mean, I know that Josh and I could sit and we can even compare quick notes, and he may have taken a day, but he just shares his notes with me, and I can knock it out in a couple hours. Yeah. And then you're talking about it, Mark, and you're like, it's going to be this big project. It's a very big difference between us.
Right.
Yeah.
But it has to go with communication and these structures that lead to your deficiencies in the pen test.
I want to circle back real quick to this risk assessment, because one of the things, and Tom kind of touched on a little bit, it provides you a multi-year roadmap for cybersecurity, where it doesn't give the impression that it's a one and done. I'll give you guys $1 million and then we're good from a cybersecurity perspective. It gives you the opportunity to say, here's what we're going to fix this year. And we're taking on the risk because we're not fixing everything. Year 2, we're going to fix this. Year 3, we're going to fix this. So you have this scheduled fiscal projection that says, here is what we're investing in cybersecurity, which is so important, right? Because so many districts out there think that this is a one-time budget, and it's not. This needs to be something that's considered like fuel for your buses. This is a cost of doing business. And we need to have an allocation for it every single year. And it's likely going to increase every single year.
And I think this is why it's important to be able to have an effective communication strategy and effective metrics that you can measure your progress. So having conversations with your board in closed session, not an open session, not publishing what filter you're using and any other security related measures, and be able to keep that. Here's where we are, and we're getting better. Here's where the pen test was. You're not going to go into all of the detail that's in a technical pen test, but you can start talking about, here's how we know, here's how you could be confident that we're getting better. We're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be put something out there that can stop, just like you can't have your school discipline policy stop fights, but you can respond to them when they happen. So you want to be able to put this comprehensive strategy, bring that board in so they recognize Lenny and I have done IT reviews, and then come and talk with the board about their vulnerabilities and why they need to invest in having a CISO or a team that is going to be looking at their cyber threats, about having funding, the risk that they're putting their organization from a financial perspective. And I think part of my job is to build a bridge and then me get over it. I need to be able to articulate clearly enough to my CFO so they understand that this is a threat, it's a problem, and needs to be prioritized, and go to my chief academic officer and have that same conversation, and then go to my operations folks and have that same conversation. But each one of those conversations is a little bit different.
Exactly.
Because it tells them what their threat is, as opposed, this is an IT thing and you guys should invest in it.
Let's talk about Managed Methods really quick, a proud sponsor of the K-12 Tech Talk podcast. I'm going to put this link into the podcast description. They have a cybersecurity and safety survey. It's like a white paper. It's a download. It was with Managed Methods and some Ed Week Research Center stuff. Really good talking about cybersecurity.
So we've taken almost an hour of your time tonight, guys. Give you, I guess, a couple more minutes and closing thoughts, or if the person listening to this, if they could do one thing tomorrow to help their posture or to address low-hanging fruit, what would be the one thing you guys would say to go in and check or do tomorrow morning?
So I have a couple. I mean, I think the first thing we've talked about, do you have a group of people that are your advisory for your cybersecurity, or is it you? And if it is you, then what steps are you going to take to bring, and it might be having lunch with one other person. Maybe it's just your procurement director, but start building the relationships to start to bring together an understanding that this is an enterprise issue, and if I don't have your help, then we all fail, right? So having that cross-functional team, I think if you don't know about the different frameworks that are out there for cybersecurity, I'd get to know that there's a lot of resources from the CIS that you could start to be involved in. Third, I would get myself associated with organizations that are dealing with cybersecurity. CoSN has a lot of paperwork, but get into that network of people. So just like with you and Chris, Josh and Chris, you guys can talk and do something, and I can benefit from that. There's other people in that network. And I think the last thing is invest in Swedish fish. And just to tie it into last week's, I think I would go green.
There you go.
Oh, boy.
Swedish fish, yeah.
Did that green chili cheeseburger not sound amazing the way he was describing it? Oh, you've only had one.
Oh, it's not one.
There's also green chili cheese. There's also green chili cheese fries.
Oh.
Which those were I lived in Albuquerque for a year and a half. Those were my favorite.
Oh.
Anything you can put cheese on, you can put green chili in. I mean, that's
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
All
right.
So the only thing I would add on to what Tom said, because a lot of what we talked about requires some time, effort, involves culture, right? So it's going to take a little bit of time. The one thing that I would say for everybody out there, you need to start looking at what is your incident response, because that is the one thing that bites every school district right in the butt when they don't have a good one. They have the wrong people telling the wrong story at the wrong time. And I think everybody needs to understand what you say matters and when you say it matters, and some things you can't take back. So for everybody out there listening to this, all the things we talked about to build the culture and the strategy, start working on that immediately. Figure out what your incident response is, not just for your IT team, but how is information going to roll up to your school board? How is it going to roll up to your superintendent? Who's doing the talking? And what's that protocol look like? That's what gets everybody in trouble.
Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Until they get punched in the mouth, and then they don't.
On that note, next week we are interviewing 2 CIOs from large districts about the cyber plan development process and some of the tips that they can give us into what does that mean. So a really good segue and really good ending from Lenny about how to build that plan, how to start to build that plan. We've learned about the importance of that. We've learned about some of the leadership structures that need to come in play. And then next week we'll learn about, or 2 weeks from now, we'll learn about how to do it.
Yeah, Don Wolf and Idris, great people. I mean, those are some phenomenal leaders in IT.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you guys are as well. So thank you so much. Josh, close us out.
Oh, sure. We appreciate your time tonight, guys. And I don't, half of what Mark says about both of you is true, it sounds like you're pretty fantastic individuals. And we
don't know if he's credible yet.
Yeah, he might be full of it too. Yeah.
I start from that premise with Mark, but
well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for putting this on the forefront, guys. It's a really important topic, and you're doing some good work here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us.
You betcha.